have some fun today. I want to look ahead to one of the wildest parts of the NBA calendar, and that is the trade deadline. Now, I know this offseason has already been crazy enough with the names that have been moved around that weren't expected to be moved. And I want to be clear from this. This is not a report on who's definitely available, but this is a ranking of players that I do think that teams could be looking to shop seriously in February around the NBA trade deadline. I'll get into why I think that each of these players could be shopped as well. This trade deadline could be just as wild and just as interesting as what this offseason has been, namely because of the second tax apron, the number of teams that are going to be rebuilding, things like that. So we're going to take a look at the names that could definitely be available in this offseason. We're talking about all that plus more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Soup.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Full Court Podcast. My name is Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow us at the Full Court YT on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it, y'all. So I want to talk about some of the names. I got 10 names on this list that I feel that could be shopped at the trade deadline. Now, of course, what I do with everything when I talk about both sides on it, why I feel like these players could be shopped, why I feel like they could also stay on their teams. But got 10 players, 2 honorable mentions, so 12 players overall that we're going to get into. Number 1, Jerami Grant. I think Jerami Grant may be one of the cleanest candidates to be moved at the trade deadline. The Grizzlies are starting a new chapter, right, with Ja Morant being moved on. Cam Boozer's the new young centerpiece that they are building around. They signed Quentin Post. They still got Cedric Coward there, who I'm very high on as well. And Jerami Grant is a veteran wing on a team that may not just be ready to win now. Now, they're trying to provide some structure with this team and get them in a place to where you want to play real basketball. And I love that like all these teams, especially the one in the top 4, all these players that win in the top 4, they all are going to teams that are going to provide structure. They're not just going to go out there and throw them out there and be like, hey, go figure it out. We'll build around you. So when you look at the Memphis Grizzlies, they have Cedric Coward there, right? Scottie Pippen Jr. is coming back from injury. You got Cameron Boozer, you got Zach Edey, you got Isaiah Stewart as well as Quentin Post and stuff like that. But like, I look at this team and I'm like, this is a team that could be primed to move some of these veteran pieces to playoff teams that could want these guys in their building. And that's just the reality of it, right? Like Gigi Jackson, is he going to be back a player that they look at to try to move on from? You look at this Memphis Grizzlies roster, and the only players that they have that are over 30 are Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, you have Jerami Grant, and you got D'Angelo Russell. Ty Jerome is 29 as well. I don't know if he'll be 30 by the trade deadline, but these are all players that I think could be moved. And Jerami Grant is one of the cleanest, a guy that can still defend a little bit, can still score, can definitely help a team if need be, if you're looking at that part of it. Now, the contract is pretty hefty, right? That's part of the reason he was moved in the trade for Ja Morant. But I still think I look at this and I say, this is definitely a player that I feel like is going to be available at the trade deadline. $34 million on his contract, a player option for next year. This is an opportunity for a team to get in on him, get his bird rights as well. They can negotiate a contract extension with him if he is traded in next offseason. So there you go. Now, why Memphis could end up keeping him is that veterans help young players develop. If you have veterans that don't get in the way but help support the development of your young players, that's the ideal thing. And I do think that Jerami Grant does give Memphis some real structure and scoring out there on the wing that could be there, right? And a team doesn't have to trade every older player just because they're in a retool and a rebuild. They don't have to do that. If the Grizzlies are more competitive than what they expect, maybe they keep him. Maybe if he's a good presence in the locker room, those type of things. But Jerami is not on this list because he's bad. Because Jerami isn't a bad player. He's a flawed player, as most players are, but he's not a bad player. But I think that this is the exact type of value that teams around the league could be looking to add at the trade deadline, especially if they have an expiring contract or a player that they don't want to take. And then maybe Memphis even takes on maybe more years on the money and gets some more picks. As we know, Memphis has a stockpile of draft picks as well. Now look at that one. The next player that I think could be moved as well is that the Charlotte Hornets have a couple. Like, the Charlotte Hornets is going to be interesting to watch because I like their roster, and they were a playoff team last year, and they could turn around and be a playoff team again this year, right? That's a possibility for the Charlotte Hornets team, absolutely. I want to be clear there. And if they are a playoff team, then they may not look to move anything. But there are 2 veterans on this Charlotte Hornets team that I think both could be moved depending on things, and that's Grayson Allen is definitely a player that could be moved, as well as Dorian Finney-Smith. These are players that absolutely I think could be moved at this trade deadline for the Chicago Bulls. Now, Dorian Finney-Smith is going to be an interesting prospect to move, mainly because he has the years left on his contract. He didn't play well. Those type of things are there. But, he could be included in another deal, much like he was in that one. Grayson Allen is a player that does provide wing toughness. He provides some shooting. He provides those things. And, you look at the depth there with Charlotte. Could he find himself out of the rotation? Maybe, maybe not. But I do think there's a really good case that they could look to keep him or move off of him depending on where the callers are coming from. You're building around Brandon Miller. You're building around Kon Knueppel. You got Haize Steinbach. You have Christian Anderson, your picks from this year as well. And so you've already moved veterans and shifted your direction. I think that contenders could call for those affordable shooting and defense that Grayson Allen and Dorian Finney-Smith do provide on paper, and we'll see. But much like I said with Memphis, there is a case to keep veterans around. Young teams need veterans in the room. They just do. You need those guys. And DFS and Grayson Allen could stabilize the rotation if those guys are there. Now, DFS, I don't know if I have as high of an expectation on him as Grayson Allen, but Grayson Allen definitely could be one of those veterans that are there. The Hornets aren't trying to tank. I don't get that feeling that they're trying to tank. So therefore, these are names to watch, but not as necessarily as I don't feel as strongly that Grayson Allen could be moved. Dorian Finney-Smith, yes. Grayson Allen, it really comes down to a couple of different things there. Next up, Julius Randle with the Brooklyn Nets. Man, I think that this guy is but the thing is that we thought that last year with the Brooklyn Nets, and then they ended up not really making any moves, right? I don't know what the hell Brooklyn's doing, but Brooklyn is a team that has definitely stacked some assets that all could be moved at the trade deadline. Namely, one of those is Julius Randle. Now, we saw Julius Randle. He didn't have necessarily the same playoffs this year that he had last year in the playoffs, where he had some of his best basketball in during that time. But you look at this team with Julius Randle, Michael Porter Jr., these are veterans that absolutely could be looked to be moved, at this trade deadline. I'm going with Julius Randle specifically here. I think that, with his contract, with where he's been, with the fact that he did help that Minnesota Timberwolves team on playoff runs going to the Western Conference Finals as well, I think that this is a team that definitely could be looking, a player that definitely could be moved as contenders could come calling. He has, 1 year after the season left as a player option. So again, a team could get him, try to talk extension with him if they want to do that. And so, Brooklyn's still on that youth timeline. You got Mikael Brown Jr., you got Joshua Jefferson to add to the players that you already drafted last year. And I do think that Julius Randle fits that classic good player, but wrong timeline part of the trade deadline. And that could be it. Right now, the signs where Brooklyn could keep him. Again, young players, they need some veterans to take pressure off. And the fact that Brooklyn was expected to do something similar last year and then really didn't do it at all, right? That's a big part in all of this also. Julius Randle is the type of player that can absolutely help you win games. He helps you win games, which is exactly why Brooklyn would have to decide on whether he's helping them or hurting them in whatever path that they decide that they want to be on. Are they trying to prioritize picks? Which even then, with the change of the lottery rules, one could say that, if you're winning and contending a little bit more, it actually works for you better than being in the bottom three. But I do think that Julius Randle is a player that's going to be available, and teams are going to come calling, seeing if they can get him and add him. It just depends on what teams need. But Julius Randle has the capability of being an all-ball creator. He can do a lot of that stuff. So teams that are looking for another on-ball creator, he can facilitate some as well. The best version of Julius Randle can help just about any playoff team. And you have to just decide on if some of his shortcomings you can live with. And I think that some teams would, because you're adding him to structure, right? So teams that have bad deals that they're looking to get off of and maybe are looking to move a protected or unprotected first that's projected to be late if they get Julius Randle, maybe you're willing to do that, and that's a team as well. Next up, the Washington Wizards, and they have two players as well on this team, in Chris Middleton and DeAndre Ayton. Now, we know that the Wizards are in this weird place. They've extended Trae Young. Reportedly, they want to work out an extension with Anthony Davis as well. You have AJ DeBonta down there. You have Alexander Sarr there. You have Trae there, the other Trae there as well, like Trae Johnson. You have these young pieces, and it seems like the Washington Wizards are this team that, I don't know, they have this two timeline thing going on in a way, right? Because you have Bub Carrington, you have Trae Johnson, you have Coulibaly, right? You have AJ DeBonta in there now. What happens? And maybe they're looking at this team and saying, hey, if AJ is everything that he's shaped up to be on paper, we can be a team that's right there competing for playoff spots right away. And maybe that's the case. But I do think Ayton and Middleton are two players as well that you can look to move on from. I know they extended Chris Middleton. They signed him as well. He brings the championship. He brings the experience. He brings the shooting. DeAndre Ayton is a player that brings some size, some rebounding, and some upside still, too. He just is a fucking head case that just doesn't seem like he gives a damn about basketball. But, the thing is the Wizards aren't in this, clear teardown anymore, right? They're in this place that's weird. And AJ DeBonta could very much benefit from having playoff level veterans around him as well. But I do think the Washington Wizards should be ready to sell. If teams come calling, whether it's Anthony Davis, whether it is DeAndre Ayton, whether it is Chris Middleton, the Wizards should be ready to start accepting some calls in regards to that one. If this team is mediocre, if players look like they're going to take a couple of years before you're really in a spot to contend for the playoffs or whatever else, Ayton could help a team that's desperate for center depth. Chris Middleton can aid a team that's desperate for some veteran shooting that doesn't really break the bank or take away from whatever else you're trying to do there. That's the thing that comes down to it. The priority for the Washington Wizards should be whatever they feel like gets the best development out of Trey Johnson, Bub Carrington, AJ DeBonta, and Alexander Sarr. That's what their focus should be on. And if moving off of some of these veteran pieces to stack assets or whatever else in that being, then that's great. But the Washington Wizards are one of the hardest teams to read because they aren't like in a true rebuild. They're not doing it the sense of how you typically expect teams to do it in a rebuild. And they're not like this they don't shape up to be this terribly bad team anymore either. And their trade deadline could depend on where they are in February and where they feel like they can benefit at based off the moves that's available to them in February. And that's a thing that could very well be there also. Next up, CJ McCollum with Atlanta. Man, listen, CJ McCollum did so good for Atlanta last year. And I want to be clear in mentioning that he was a player that played really well for that Atlanta Hawks team last year. And CJ McCollum could very well stay if Atlanta is good, right? That is it. But the caveat is that, you look at it, the Hawks went 19-4 with CJ McCollum as a starter last year. And with him returning on a 1-year, $21 million deal, there's a lot of reason to think that they can keep him. But at the same time, that contract also makes him a clean move at the trade deadline, especially if you're looking to gain anything else in the Eastern Conference. It makes that kind of a more clear thing for them that they can do there. So listen, I'm not saying that CJ McCollum is just going to outwardly be easily available, but they could look to move on from that. They drafted Kingston Flemings, who I like a lot there. They also traded for Devin Carter as well, so there could be some thought there. You have Aaron Wiggins in there as well, who can provide some shooting and some spacing, some stuff like that. I could see a world in which CJ McCollum is available at the trade deadline, but it really depends on a lot of different things. If the Hawks underperform, you absolutely move them. If the Hawks are good and they look like they can go on a serious run in the playoffs, you keep him. He already showed that he can do what Trae Young couldn't do for you, and that's play off of Jalen Johnson, with Jalen Johnson being the main facilitator down there. You keep that going if you can. But I do think in regards to that, you look at that and you say, this is a player that makes some sense to be moved if it comes down to it. I think he's one of the cleanest conditional names, depending on the state of the team at the trade deadline, and we'll see how that works out. Next up, Karis LeVert with Milwaukee. I think this is a thing. He makes sense as a big trade chip, right? If Milwaukee does plan on keeping Tyler Hero at all, Karis LeVert could be the one that ends up being. You already re-signed Gary Trent Jr. as well. He's older. He's more movable. The Bucks also have a very crowded perimeter rotation. And so when you look at that, the Bucks, they have kind of stacked themselves in a position as well where you have these number of movable players, if you decide to do so, that just don't fit your timeline anymore. You have Tyler Hero, who you could move. You have Karis LeVert, who you could move. You have Kyle Kuzma, who you can move at any time. Miles Turner, you could move at any time. Jaime Jaquez could be a player that you also move because a team looking for some six-man depth also. So there's a number of players that can fit on this. Now, some of those players are young, so the Milwaukee Bucks could look to keep those guys, develop them, see if maybe Jaime could turn into more than just a six-man, right? But a guy like Karis LeVert is definitely a guy that I think could be moved because of what he brings to the perimeter rotation of a team, especially playoff teams. And we know how point of attack defenders really matter. Maybe Karis LeVert can be that one. Next up, Brandon Ingram with the Los Angeles Clippers here. This is a guy that I just think easily could be moved. The Clippers, they gained some talent. This is the team that I look at and said they have accumulated a lot of talent that could just look to be moved at the trade deadline as they look to then stack the deck with some assets as they are now fully in a rebuild. You traded Kawhi Leonard. Well, that trade is on hold right now. But, Brandon Ingram, if he stays in this trade, seems like it's eventually going to go through. You have Brandon Ingram, right, who you can easily move. You have maybe even Darius Garland if you decide to do that. Rui Hachimura, a player that you did sign. But Brandon Ingram specifically is a player that I don't think is long to be with the Los Angeles Clippers. I think you need to move him immediately as soon as possible to gain that value that's there on his contract. And it just makes sense. Brandon Ingram is a movable player that can help some teams. He can provide some size, he can provide some shooting, he can provide some scoring, those type of things that teams like that need. and he is a clean get. Now, the contract is huge, right? So there's that part of it as well that you can't overlook. $40 million contract that has $41 million player option at the end of this upcoming season. But overall, I think that Brandon Ingram is definitely a player that could also be moved. And I don't even know if the Clippers should look to keep him. If teams come calling and they're offering you anything that helps your rebuild in your future, you move that for that. Next up, Norman Powell with my Chicago Bulls. When the Bulls gave him a 1+1 deal, a 2-year deal with the team option in the second year, an easily movable $22.5 million contract, I think that it just comes down to if Dalen Swain actually looks like he's going to be ready to start anytime soon, they could very well move on from him. The Bulls are clearly rebuilding around young talent. Norman Powell's the only player over 30 on the Chicago Bulls team. But if the Bulls are more competitive than what people think they're going to be, which Norman Powell's already talked about, there's a definite chance that the Bulls could keep him and keep him long-term as well. By long-term, I mean to the end of his contract. That is a possibility here, but I think that Norman Powell could be a player that also is available at the trade deadline, depending on how some things shake out for that team, and look out for how it happens. The last player on this list is Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday is interesting in Portland because Portland's guard rotation is ridiculous. With Ja, Dame, Jrue, Scoot, Shaedon Sharpe, like somebody's going to move. And Jrue Holiday being the defensive player that he is, he's older, he's expensive. I think contenders would absolutely value his defense and playoff experience. Now, I know that the Portland Trail Blazers were a playoff team last year, and maybe they could very well turn to that as well, but I think that that guard rotation is going to need something to shake, and Jrue Holiday is the one that I'm picking is going to shake there. They just brought Dame back. They just traded for Ja. I think they're going to want to hold on to Scoot for a little while longer to see what he's going to turn into. And while some Blazers fans are asking and calling for Shaedon Sharpe to be moved, which still confuses me, I think that you're going to hold on to him there. The only way that I see them holding on to Jrue Holiday, or one of the ways, is if this team wins and wins at a much higher level than many people are expecting them to. Him drawing the toughest defensive assignment out on the perimeter is also something that could definitely help them as well. And that's a player that I think that you look at and that you say definitely could be moved as well for the team, and we'll see what's going to happen. And then the honorable mention is Paul George. George is not in my top 10 because of his contract is difficult to move. His injury history, he doesn't play a lot. But the logic is obvious here. Boston moved on from Jaylen Brown, and they added Paul George. But if Paul George and the picks that they got help them get something that's like a Trey Murphy that's there and better for their future, they do that. And I think that's going to be moves out on the table. Boston's going to be listening. I don't know how actively hard they're going to be shopping him, but I do think that in February, the Boston Celtics could very well and probably should look to move Paul George. And if he's been healthy up until that point, there's definitely a possibility there for him to be moved, and you get some value back in regards to that one as well. You look at who they already moved on from. Jaylen Brown's gone, right? He's gone in regards to that one. They did add Mitchell Robinson. They did add Mike Conley. So, we'll see what happens in regards to that. But I think Paul George is definitely somebody that could be moved by the end of all of this as well. And Grayson Allen was one of my honorable mentions, but I talked about him when I talked about the Charlotte Hornets. I should have said that then. But let me know down below, who are some players that you think could be moved at this trade deadline that could be obvious guys that could be moved? Let me know what you guys think in regards to that one. But make sure you sound off in that comment section. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at the Full Court YT on every social media platform. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBACentralShow@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball and NBA related. And I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making an episode. Probably tomorrow. Peace out.
Been a presentation of the Breaks Media.